It's the worst of the CBC for February 19th, 2020, the show where I watch the CBC so you don't have to. And it's been good to not do this for almost a week. I had a week away from CBC. It was the last week was just the same thing over and over again. It's good to get away from it. And then today, it was the exact same thing. So I just assume anyone who's been trying to take my place, you're probably dead of a brain aneurysm. So thank you for your sacrifice. But we still have Wet'suwet'en covered poorly, coronavirus ship, and then two other stories. We're just going to have to go through all four stories that were on the CBC today because they all drove me equally insane. And now you have to hear about them. So they all have terribly covered and they're missing things. So it fits under the umbrella. 10 out of 10 on the Rosemary Barton scale, by the way. We're just going to skip to the end there. 10 out of 10. Let's move back. Okay, first one, Wet'suwet'en. The shutdown thing. Again, they present it in the most dishonest way possible. Now, they do eventually give all the information, but they do it in a way that, okay, one, they don't say the 85% of the Wet'suwet'en disagree. They keep pushing the radicals' propaganda, and again, they say the liberals are saying the conservatives are radical, but then not giving sort of the conservatives a chance to defend themselves, right? Just sort of making the accusation. They also don't cover the fact that Justin Trudeau, who runs a minority government, would not involve Andrew Scheer in the negotiating process. They also don't say, again, that the elected officials, that they set the framework that these renegade band of Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, even though not all the chiefs are with them, the elected chiefs are against them, the band councils are against them, and 85% of the Wet'suwet'en nation is on the side of Canada, has approved of the LNG pipeline. They want jobs and prosperity. They do not mention this. It's the 85% number. They say the elected chiefs and other people disagree. But then they keep showing the radicals, and they make the point, okay, what they're trying to do is make the point that, conservatives are just trying to blame it on some radicals, but not the whole First Nations. They don't want to implicate all First Nations, but what they're doing is drawing the line implicating that it really is all of the First Nations, and you see this, because they then showed a Mohawk blockade, which the Mohawk are against, but a couple of native Mohawkers and a couple of eco-radicals get together and say, now they're the Mohawk, and they represent all the Indigenous. So then they literally said, okay, but we have the chief of the Mohawk, something Simon, who is against all of them, who wants the blockades to end, who wants to get back on track. Instead of cutting to him, right, they then cut to some Indigenous studies professor for, I counted, 6 minutes to explain how this protest does actually represent all Native Americans, right? And this has been building for 150 years. He says the narrative they want to say. This is really the compressed anger of 150 years of evil Canada coming to a head against the poor Indigenous, right? They got someone to actually say the narrative they want to explain for them, which is so frustrating because, listen, you don't want this to be blamed on the Native population when it's all said and done, because this is going to end in disaster. And I listen, I know the left cares nothing about minorities and Native people or blacks or Muslims or Jews or any of the stuff. We all know this. But the way this is going, it ends with people sick and dying because we need rail transport. There's just the economic cost. When economies go down, people die. There's that runoff. The fact that all our agriculture is transported by rail. So we're facing a major economic shutdown. Food shortages. Who gets hit first by the food shortages? The millionaires and billionaires? The poor people are going to die. But more seriously, and the CBC will love to spin this in their way, and I know how they'll spin this, but currently our water treatment facilities and the chemicals that treat our water plants and make the water drinkable and clean and keep us alive, they're transported by rail. Which means, I don't know, we have about 30 days of this, of reserves. I'm not an expert on the amount of reserves we have on this, but once those run out, the water quality goes down. Do you trust the Liberal government to inform you when our water becomes undrinkable because of their failure to act on this? And we've hit a couple weeks now. It's been shut down. This goes on a few weeks more. We hit that point where we have to cut down the amount of water treatment we do, scale it down, and then we just have untreated water. The whole country would be on a boil water advisory, and they'll love to play that up. But do you trust the government to tell us in time, or do you think they're going to wait until someone ends up dead and people are in hospital sick, and then we don't have the medical resources to keep people alive, and then hundreds of people start to die from either directly from this or indirectly, and that can compound to thousands? How do you think people are going to feel when they realize it's because of these idiot protesters. And then do you really want to portray these idiot protesters who are foreign-funded eco-radicals who aren't all, some natives are there, but it's mostly a bunch of stupid white people? How do you want to frame it as, oh, is the indigenous people's fault this all happened, even though all their major leaders are against all this nonsense because they know they're connected to reality? So play this game and see how it ends. So there's that. It was frustrating. Then we have the coronavirus nonsense, which, again, oh, there's a cruise ship. Oh, how could a cruise ship get in? Like, there's a giant incubation chamber. But, again, it's just boring. And, again, we don't talk about what China's doing. We don't talk about the videos of them grabbing people out of their rooms and just dragging people off. Now, other media outlets are starting to ask the question, was this created by the Chinese government as a means to stifle civil dissent? You know, can we ask any legitimate questions? Nope. Same old boring nonsense. No stories, so we can avoid talking about anything real. Then we have the third story, which was Canada. The UN says Canada climate changing bad. We need carbon taxes. We need this and we need this. But it's fascinating. The new report on sort of like what we need to do as a society. One, you know, destroy our economy, put a carbon tax on everything, you know, eco whatever. The other, I mean, we've all said what we need to say about that. The other thing I found fascinating is they were talking about censoring social media or regulating social media because social media is targeting advertisements towards children, which is a very interesting attack. Now, again, because it's sort of a quasi-legitimate way to go after these networks because, like, you're targeting ads towards children, but, I mean, you're really just targeting ads towards people who are on your service. This is one of those things where, like, sort of you need the free market side, and we're playing with very dangerous fire. But, again, this then relates to these sort of major mainstream media, liberal, left-wing, totalitarian ideology that they need to control and censor and have some sort of power over social media, because if the people use social media, then they might think things that aren't supposed to be thought, and that's bad news bears for those in charge. Then we have the final story that they covered, the fourth story, which is actually the first time I've ever felt a major legitimate impulse of, I should run for government. And the only thing that made me do it, you're not going to like this, but it was a story about marijuana and how prices vary across the provinces. Basically, it was a story about how the government screwed up legalization of marijuana. And this is the inner libertarian in me wanting to run for government, even though those things directly oppose. But it just drives me nuts. And if you're going to be like one of those like really, really conservative, socially conservative mobs, like, oh my God, marijuana's running the world. No, it's not. Okay? It's like alcohol. It's a drug. It's not good for you. It's not terrible for you. Like, who cares? My thing is, who cares? My impulse to run for government is I want to legalize marijuana because the way the government has monopolized marijuana is so goddamn stupid. And then we have people on CBC explaining the basic rules of economics, basically to the CBC, pretending that we don't all know this. Like, oh, really? If you just artificially create monopolies and then drive up prices, like, you're not going to make money and there'll be a black market supply? Like, it drives me absolutely insane. We have these major government-run corporations that are mass-producing marijuana, which means it's lower quality, it's also more expensive, right? The fossil fuels are like, it just, remember when everyone was like, we should legalize marijuana, that we'd make billions of dollars for tax revenue, we could use that for healthcare? Well, we're losing hundreds of millions and billions of dollars because these goddamn idiots messed it up. And that's my, I just want to have the fun of going up there and I would, if O'Toole, McKay, Leslie Lewis, Peterson, any one of these bozos, if you're a conservative politician, a great way to make some headlines is, I'm telling you, run on a platform now of legalizing marijuana. And be like, well, it's already legal. You say, no, it's a nationalized monopoly. We're going to actually make it legal. And just use, because it's so great, use marijuana as an example of why free markets work for the rest of the country. That will make the left pay attention. I'm telling you. This is the thing where you can win. If you can just say, we're going to legalize marijuana. We're not going to control and have these stupid national monopolies where we throw away money into the abyss. We don't need the government to hold our hands. I'm telling you, this is a great way to win over people on the center left and make them understand basic economics. But then I watched more CBC and I instantly died. So 10 out of 10 the Rosemary Barton scale. I will see everyone tomorrow.